Great. Can we hand over to Benjamin? Welcome, Benjamin. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to run through a presentation. Let me know if you can see it properly.
Yep. Beautiful.
Yes. Excellent. Yep. So good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me, first of all. And, there was a lot of, in the introduction, very moving. I think it's been a very interesting year for everyone in this industry. A very challenging year, but a year where we have seen more innovation and more disruption in a few months that I've personally seen in many years. So I think the level of innovation that we have witnessed is just a reminder of, the resilience of our industry and the hospitality sector overall. So my intention here today is just share insights and hopefully share some ideas and innovation that people in the audience or on Zoom can actually take with you to your businesses, to your restaurants, your cafes, your hotels, and maybe make you rethink from a different angle. As you were mentioning in the intro, Livid is the world's largest restaurant design company. So we open roughly 1,000 restaurants every year. We're active in 46 countries. So basically what this allows us is to gather a lot of data. We understand trends. We can see what happens in Asia. We can see how it translates in the Middle East or in Africa or in the US, wherever that is. It was very fascinating, over the last, 8 or 9 months since COVID actually hit. We have been able to follow through our clients and our projects, the impact, but also the innovation and how different markets have pivoted quickly through COVID. And it's been fascinating to have this kind of crystal ball of the whole world. Specifically coming from Sweden, as most of you know, Sweden, I believe, is the only country in the world where we've never had a lockdown. Restaurants never closed. We don't have to wear masks. Air travel has been opened all day long since the beginning of the pandemic. So it's been fascinating also to follow, the different processes in the restaurant industry from countries that went into complete lockdown to countries like mine where nothing really closed down. And I'm going to share some of the insights of that. But basically what makes us different, I would say, is that it's not only about design. We look into operations, we look into technology. So we are on a quest to reinvent the industry and help our clients, specifically private equity and investors, in making their restaurants more profitable. We have done currently somewhere between 13,000 and 14,000 restaurants. I hope we've learned a thing or two. I know we have some time for Q&A, so I'll be happy to answer any questions. But mainly is the world's largest brands that we work with and help innovate and think differently. So that goes all from strategic consulting in terms of, how your brand should be, how they should operate, how to develop those concepts, to the smallest touch point from, the sound and the scent and the energy in the space. So it's a very unique company. I haven't seen anyone at our scale doing what we do. Normally, when you create something, you run through 3 or 4 different agencies to do something like this. So I'll start with some insights. One of the insights that we've had, and it's been very clear when some markets have reopened, is the pent-up demand for experiences. As we all know, in many markets, QSR, fast food, drive-through, curbside has just exploded. When dining restaurants were not allowed to open, everyone pivoted to off-premise and curbside and drive-through. But as markets open up, we've witnessed an incredible demand for experiences, to go back to dining with precautions depending on the market, etc. And I think there's still an underlying truth in terms of newer generations wanting to spend more on experiences than buying stuff and buying things. So I'll take this as an intro to the presentation and also share what we hear from both our clients, the biggest brands in the world, but also the guests. We do a lot of consumer research, and it's very interesting to follow how that evolves over time. We've been in the industry for 22 years now. So we've been following the different trends in how consumer demographics and psychographics change across the world. And what I can share, you guys are on the other side of the world, is that they are merging together. The regional and global differences are just becoming smaller and smaller. And we feel and see how different consumer profiles, no matter if they're in Asia or in the US or South America, they're getting more and more linked together. So what we did is we asked, two guests, what would be your ideal restaurant? And a very common feedback was a Soho House without the membership, right? So it's a place where I can work, I can live, I can play. We talked about this in the industry, and the quote from Anthony Bourdain, restaurants are so much more than a place for food. But it's also important to be a place to see and be seen. It's a place where you want to belong and ideally aspire to. If you can hit that aspirational touch, that emotional connection a lot of people talk about, it's very powerful. And don't underestimate value. I think we're all very conscious about the value. And what we are seeing now in markets as they reopen is that consumers are more picky. We think more about when we go out and why we go out, and therefore think about the money we're going to spend and where and why we're going to spend it. But we did the same question to our clients, the big brands, and it doesn't matter if you're a hotel player, a landlord, an investor. The responses were very similar. We all want the traffic of a QSR, but in a lifestyle wrapping. We started witness this, many years ago, actually in China, where, landlords were trying to, beat each other on higher end developments. And they wanted, hey, we want these anchors that drive a lot of traffic, but we don't want the QSR. So how can we solve that? Brands need to be relevant. Of course, this is an investment, right? So return on invested capital is something that is part of every single brief, If some of you in the audience are linked to multi-unit operation, it's all about that, right? It's really that's what's going to drive growth and scalability. One of the things that we've seen most innovation in over the last month is efficiency. And we all seen this where, chefs have been needed to be delivery drivers and everyone has started to do. And actually, I think we're in a once in a lifetime opportunity to don't lose that. Everything that we as operators have done over the few months where we've cross-trained and we've really worked back almost like a mom and pop restaurant where there's no titles and everyone does everything and everyone helps and do the dishes and serves and runs. That's something really powerful and something very efficient. So I'll encourage you and I'll talk more about it later in the presentation. But you also mentioned, the reduced access to skilled labor, which is a challenge in the industry globally. Not only the reduced access to skilled labor, but also the increase of labor costs. And that is paramount. I think both New Zealand, Australia, Scandinavia, markets where we pay very high hourly labors, that's where a lot of the innovation is coming. So, I'll wrap that up with the technology piece, which, I think some of you have heard us speak about before, but it's integral part of what the future of restaurants is going to be. So what we did, after opening these thousands and thousands of restaurants across the world, we actually thought that the big players out there were not innovative enough. So we said, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to put our money where our mouth is, which is kind of strange for a consultant. It's much easier to come in and say, you should do this and you should do that. Then rather put your money up, open your own restaurants, use them as a lab, and then say, hey, guys, come to us and we'll show you what we're doing. So our experiment was like this. We wanted to combine extreme operational efficiency, like a QSR, affordable, quick service, but put it in a high-end lifestyle environment that felt more like fine dining. And nobody had done this. So we really treated it as an experiment. And we created this lab brief. And the lab brief was, we wanted a fine dining environment with fast casual prices. We wanted high throughput. We wanted to be able to serve 1,000 guests in a restaurant with a high transaction capacity. But at the same time, one needed to make it in a tight footprint. We all know how real estate costs are rising across the globe, and with the reduced capex. And here's the interesting challenge. We actually said that we would never recruit anyone that had previous restaurant experience. So to work in our lab restaurants, you would never have worked in another restaurant. And we would have no chefs, because we see one of the challenges in the industry is finding proper chefs, training them, and then getting consistency and replicability as you scale. This whole mix with operational efficiency and staff flexibility, a little bit like I mentioned before in terms of cross-training, and then powered by tech. And we actually decided to open these labs in some of the most challenging markets in the world. So we opened one in California, in Los Angeles. You know, if you ask anyone in the US where not to open a restaurant, it would be California. I can sign up on that. And we also opened them in Sweden, which after Norway, I think is the most expensive labor market in the world. So I'm going to share some of the learnings that we've had over these years, and hopefully they can inspire you in your operations in your restaurant. So this is an image for our Stockholm store. It was an immediate success since we opened. We were actually named the Amazon Go of restaurants for the technology that's underlying the restaurant. And we got a lot of buzz from that, but we didn't want to stop here. So since the Stockholm opening 3 years ago, we opened 3 more labs. So we're almost opening a new restaurant lab that we operate, that we use as an innovation hub every year. And we're not going to stop. So the image that you see now on screen is our 2.0 version. This restaurant opened in Los Angeles a little bit over a year ago in downtown LA. So as you can see, it looks like a fine dining restaurant, very elevated design. Funny enough, we won the best restaurant design of the year in Los Angeles. We have been nominated for America's Best Bar. Next week, we're nominated for the world's best restaurant design. So just because it's operationally efficient doesn't mean that it has to be ugly. Everything that you see in these images was actually built off-site. It was built in Europe, actually in Spain, and sent in containers and mounted on-site in only 17 days. So a very innovative approach to how to scale and grow restaurants. So I can see a gorgeous bar, a gorgeous space, a lot of high-end materials, but basically everything is sourced directly. So we buy it in the quarry in China, ship it, the stone to the restaurants. All the materials are, assembly and basically dry mounted on site. So as you can see, it looks like a fine dining restaurant. We have, for example, the most Instagrammed restroom in the US right now. So, you'll have one message on the ladies' restroom, which is this one, and then you have another one in the male's restroom. I'm not going to disclose it. You'll have to come and visit. But one of the interesting things is what's underneath the hood. So just because it's pretty doesn't mean it works. And I think this is really important. The world is full of very beautiful restaurants, but what's interesting is how we can make them more profitable. So interestingly enough, during the first week of opening, we spent $0 on marketing, and we got 1 Instagram follower per second. So the power of design, don't underestimate this. All these images that you see, they're user-generated imagery. So very interesting to follow how consumers react to interior design. One of the interesting things is that we actually set up as a challenge that we wanted to design for women. We wanted to create a female-friendly restaurant. So there's no TVs, there's no beer tabs, there's no hidden corners, there's nobody, you can see and be seen for everyone. And actually 75% of guests in Los Angeles are women. So very interesting how you can actually strategize to a specific customer audience and then just use design to hit on those targets. In terms of day parts, what we wanted to create is an all-day hangout. I think we all have the same challenge in the industry, how to bring more day parts, right? We might have a very strong lunch and a weekend dinner, and then in between we have non-peak hours. How do we attack breakfast? So what we created is this hangout spot where you can come from 7 a.m. in the morning, you can grab coffee, you can sit with your laptop, you can use Wi-Fi for free, and really make this your new hangout spot in the neighborhood. So it goes all the way from breakfast to lounge with plenty of plugs. You can hang out, you can grab lunch, but also it goes all the way to late night. So we great after work vibe and then dinner. And I've shared to the team at production a short 1-minute video that I'd like to show you in terms, so you can actually see what, this was a Thursday night at VLA, actually in March, right pre-COVID closures. So hopefully you can enjoy the space virtually. Thank you for that. Amongst other things, one of the things that we designed for is events. We've been named the best new place for events in Los Angeles. This was a former bank, so you can rent everything from the vault to different areas, and it's great revenue drivers for Mondays, Tuesdays, when you're off peak. If you create and think when you strategize about your restaurant and your space, how you can drive revenue from your non-traditional revenue streams is very interesting. But I'm not going to talk just about this restaurant, because what's really interesting is not this restaurant, it's not about this presentation, is the insights that we have gathered through operating our own restaurants and helping brands across the world. And hopefully some of them are interesting to you. So one of the things that we've been playing with is a simple menu. So these dishes are actually from the restaurant. These dishes take a maximum of 40 seconds to build, and they're done by students. Our average age in the restaurant is 20 years. So these are mostly students, 20 years old, never worked in a restaurant. And basically we treat this as an assembly line, but it's very beautifully presented. So, some of the interesting things that we learned here is how can you actually build a menu where you don't need a chef, when you don't need skilled labor, but it still feels relevant, it feels upscale. All the images that you see on your screen are actually images from guests taking pictures of the food. So it's all about creating this emotion, this feeling of upscale, how food is presented, the plateware, the cutlery, the ambience. If we speak to guests, they would never say that there's actually no kitchen. I'll talk more about the equipment, because we only have one oven. There's nothing else. There's no hoods in the kitchen. The whole restaurant back of the house is 60 square meters, 600 square feet. And you can still get a very decent menu. For those of you not familiar with Swedish kroner, if you take 1 0 out, it would be US dollars. So the most expensive item on the menu is $17. We've also played with breakfast menus. So we're now about to open a lab in a hotel in Dubai, where we're going to run a breakfast menu operation for 400 breakfast covers in 1 hour, a la carte. So helping brands moving away from buffet, because as you know, COVID has severely impacted buffets in restaurants. So we're applying all our learnings, all technology, our kitchen efficiency to be able to run, a la carte breakfast at really big volumes. So as you can see, these are some of the presentations of the food, but I also want to stop on the drinks. So we don't have any chefs, but we don't have mixologists either. So what we've done is that we pre-batch all the drinks. The drinks should take between 12 and 14 seconds to pour. But in order to kind of balance out that you don't have a mixologist shaking and stirring your drink, we focused a lot on the presentation. To your left on your screen, you can see a drink that comes in yellow, and when you pour it, it turns red, and then it's an hourglass that you drink from. To the right is our best-selling drink. Of course, in Los Angeles downtown, it's called the Smoking Pot. We sell 200 of these a night with dry ice and come smoking. The moment you cross the floor with it, everyone Instagrams it and wants to buy it. This is actually our only piece of equipment. So everything is prepped, pre-serviced, and done à la minute, so we have no food waste, which is extremely important to balance out the food cost. It's a digital masterpiece. We've created it. It's got controlled temperature. So just the fact that we can design equipment is a huge help, as well as a huge asset to bring throughput. This oven can produce a dish every 6 seconds. So one of the things that I want to touch on is cross-training. And this is something that I'd like to encourage every one of you in the audience and on the virtual space as well. If you're not using it, I would encourage you to look at guests per labor hour as a metric. So basically, you take all your guests that you get in a day. Let's say you have 1,000 guests a day. And then you take all your labor hours. And when I say labor hours, it includes cleaning, prepping, pre-opening, post-closure. So every single hour that you have, and you divide it by your guests, and that will give you how many guests per labor hour. The most interesting part of this is cross-training. The more you cross-train your team members, the more guests per labor hour you're going to get up. So we're challenging the industry a bit, and I'd love to challenge every one of you in the audience, is to break up the silos. The traditional way of running restaurants, where you have a chef, a head chef, a sous chef, a runner, a buzzer, a GM, an assistant GM. In our lab restaurants, we have no positions. Everyone is a team member. So we just have one person that has more experience in scheduling and in coaching, but everyone does everything. So our GM do the dishes. And that allows you to move team members from front and back of the house very seamlessly, because you don't need the skill sets, right? So you can be a front of the house team member and work on the back of the house. With this efficiency, what we are able to do is it takes only 4 minutes from the moment you order the food to you have your food on your table and have paid. So the advantage of that is, if you think of a dining journey, it's basically 3 parts. Is the first part, you get to the restaurant, you get seated, you get your menu, you go through the menu, you wait for your waiter, you order your food, that's triggered to the kitchen. First part, let's say 15, 20 minutes. Then the food arrives and you enjoy your dinner, 20, 25, 30 minutes. And then you have another 10 or 15 minutes when you ask for the check and you pay and the credit card goes away and you leave the restaurant. What we're trying to do, and I'll encourage you to try it out, is how to shorten the first part and the last part, and just focus on the middle part. Because if you really take the other parts out, you can increase your table turns. So out of our restaurants, we do an average of 7 to 8 table turns on peak days, which makes it extremely efficient. So, with this, we can actually do a transaction every 30 seconds. So that has to be matched with the cross-training of your team members, with the kitchen efficiency, with the lack of oven and reheating or limited oven and reheating in the back. Think of every part of the operation. How can you start running it like a QSR to get those throughputs, out of every 30 seconds? One of the challenges that we were getting with our hotel clients is that they're really, really mad because they have huge kitchens with 24-hour team members on staff, and then their corridors are full of these guys. So what we've been doing now and working with hotels is beating them, right? So how can we serve room service within 5 minutes from the moment you order? Because then these guys have no chance. No matter how fast they are, they will never beat you. So understanding operational efficiency can really drive, speed of service. In terms of return of investment and sourcing, I mentioned briefly how to source differently, how to cut the middleman. From the marble is cut in the quarry to it ends up in a table like this with a brass edge and a leg. It passes normally through 10 different companies. So if you can go directly to the source, we're hitting returns of investments in less than 6 months. But it's always about thinking, how can I bring it closer to the source? I also want to share disruptive thinking in terms of packaging, which has been more important than ever now during the pandemic with all the off-premise. This is our pizza box. We called it the pizza box for the boardroom. So it actually slides out, and the friction of when you slide it is the same as when you open an Apple product. The interior is gold, the exterior is matte black. Everyone told us we were completely mad. You cannot spend $1 on a pizza box. It makes no sense, but we want to try it anyway. What we did experiments is putting exactly the same food in our box and in a white box, and asked consumers how much they were willing to pay. And they were willing to pay 27% more for exactly the same food just in our box. So never underestimate the packaging, especially if you're an off-premise virtual brand, the dark kitchens. Really make sure that you focus on your packaging, because it's going to be the only impact that you have with your guests. And it's extremely, extremely relevant in terms of value perception. What we did not expect is actually that 80% of consumers that ordered this box actually posted on Instagram. So what we're doing now is that we're actually still paying $1 because we only have 3 restaurants, but we take that from marketing budget. We actually don't take it from operational budget. So very interesting learnings in terms of packaging. We started to get orders of 200 pizzas, 150 pizzas. So we started to call back and say, hey, who's got 200 friends? And it's actually weddings. So nightcaps on weddings, they want to have the pizza when they're a bit drunk, but they don't want your regular QSR pizzas. They order a huge amount of pizzas from our restaurants. So, packaging can really change the perception of your product. In terms of technology, we invest heavily in a tech-driven experience. So in our restaurants right now, we can be in this call, we can be at a meeting, you can sit in the auditorium, you place your order on your phone, and you don't tell the restaurant when you're coming. The moment you walk through the door, you break the geofence, the order is automatically triggered into the KDS in the kitchen. I can take any seat in the restaurant whenever I want. Within 5 minutes, food is going to find me. We're the only restaurant in the world that I know of that has an accuracy of 1 inch. So within 3 centimeters, we know where you're sitting. So we actually know on which side of the table the order came from. We can run that. You enjoy your dinner. And whenever you're ready, you just walk out the door. The moment you break the geofence, or if your phone battery dies, because that's something we had to learn the hard way, the check is closed. So it's a completely seamless experience. In our latest restaurant in Sweden, we actually installed the antennas on the top of the building. So we had this experience on the patio. You can walk up to the patio, your food will arrive. When you're ready, you just walk out. So think of the technology that's available that can create both a seamless experience, but also reduce the amount of labor and team members needed. What we do in our labs, we pack them with all sorts of sensors. So we measure everything: MAC addresses, beacons, geofencing, heat mapping, how do guests move around the restaurant, if they've been with us before, temperature sensors, light sensors, everything you can imagine we pack these restaurants with, because we use them as a lab. Not everything works, but we really want to make sure that we have the ability not only to measure everything, but also to track everything. So we correlate sales patterns with weather, temperature, and we actually know every 15 minutes in real time how many guests are in the restaurant. So with that, we can actually analyze and send alerts to wearables to our team members in terms of different actions that they can take to either increase throughput or focus on upsell if we're not at capacity. So very, very interesting once you start analyzing the data. And I think it's not about gathering the data, it's about analyzing the data and knowing what to do with them. One of the things that I'd encourage you to look is in time value. Time value, Disney works with time value, for example, is the amount of value you can extract per minute out of a guest or a visitor. So really try to understand and map out the customer journey in your restaurants, in your hotels, in your cafes, and understand along that journey on what minutes do you extract more value from them, and then try to cut off the areas where you don't have as much value. It's a very, very interesting exercise to do. A few insights from the tech piece, and I'm going to go through it quickly because some of you might have heard it already. The impact of music. We eat with our ears. We actually run a test with McDonald's and Spotify in Sweden. Spotify in Sweden actually uses our restaurant. Their headquarters are on top of us, so they use our restaurants as their lab for the impact of music in the industry. So we can actually drive a 9.1% change in consumer behavior within the restaurant, depending on if we play brand fit music or just popular music. And you can even, with music, you can focus on what type of items. So here we wanted to sell desserts, shakes, and smoothies, which are the high margin items. Depending on what typology of the music and the music matches your brand, it's extremely powerful. And once you have the data to analyze it, we get a lot of the questions, what is brand fit music? So I want to share with you what this is. This is a sound scan that we've developed together with the team at Sound Target Brand from Spotify. So a brand here, for example, could either be energetic or calm. There's no right or wrong. But here you can map out how you stand, and then the whole database of songs at Spotify is then tagged with this attributes. So you can have algorithms create those playlists specifically to how you want your brand to be perceived. The other thing that is very interesting and that I encourage you to play with is music and volume. So we did experiments playing exactly the same music in restaurants that had healthy and unhealthy food. So we had salads and burgers and salads and pizza. When we played exactly the same music, 15 decibels higher, sales on non-healthy food went up 10%. So now you know when you go to a Hard Rock Cafe why the rock and roll is so high. Very interesting. Another thing that we did is be able to do dynamic volume control. So we know in real time how many guests are in the restaurant. We know if we want to drive throughput or increase sales, and then an algorithm can actually change the energy of the music, the pitch, the volume, and the type of playlist that we're playing automatically without the team members or the GM needing to think of that. So the more you can automate item, the more the GM can focus on hospitality, which is really what computers are not good at, and we as humans are much better at. Another thing is scent strategy. When we change from wood fire oven scent to fresh basil scent, our salad sales go up 13%. So understanding what you can do with scent and how it impacts consumer behavior, very, very important. In countries like ours, where winters are very dark, summer's very light, similar to you guys down there, the impact of real-time light control. Consumers don't want to go into a dark space when it's light outside and vice versa. So adapt your timing and your lighting in real time. And then finally, one insight that is quite new, which we talk a lot with team members and employees and understand what is important for them. And one of the most important thing is having a say in the brand, feel that they have a partnership in it. And the younger generations, they are revolting against uniforms. So we're getting a lot of negative feedback on uniforms. So all the brands we work with, we're now doing style guides. So basically it's a reference, a framework. Within that framework, express yourselves. This is how we want to look. This is how we want to feel, because not everyone feels good in a bow tie or suspenders, right? So you really want to encourage them to express themselves and have that personality. If you want to hire for attitude and then you can train people, this is one of the most important feedback that we've got, and I wanted to share with you. So just as a quick summary, and I want to make sure that we have a few minutes for Q&A, what are the learnings that we have and what are the things that we can share with you? So, 30 seconds per guest on throughput, very short ticket times, 4 to 7 minutes. Make sure it's an assembly, although it might feel and the ingredients might be extremely high quality. No cooks, cross-train all stations, really understand how you can cross-train your team members. Dry food cost, it. When you get this volumes, food cost goes down. Focus on having a lot of seats. Once your back of the house is extremely tight, like we have, we get 200 seats of 400 square meters, right? So 4,000 square feet. That balance, you can't hit it unless your back of the house is very efficient and tiny. And then use technology. You don't need by any means all the technology that we have. Just think of what I've shared. And do your research, because there's a lot of off-the-shelf solutions that are not expensive and can drive a lot of insights. And maybe you can do it on one or two of your restaurants and then apply that learnings to the rest of your portfolio. And then focus on drinks. Drinks are great revenue drivers, but specifically if you can de-skill them and you crank them out every few seconds, that's very important. So across the world, no matter where we're opening, we're running at a 30% plus EBITDA. So it's a good benchmark. We've actually been cash flow positive during the whole pandemic. So it's also been a pressure test for us. And I'll be more than happy to share some insights. And on screen, you have my contact details. If you want to shoot me an email or WhatsApp, I'll be more than happy to follow up on more questions if we don't have time to answer them today.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Now, We have a really large list of questions, and so what I thought I might do is, if it's okay with you, Ben, and I'm sorry just to like surprise you with this, but what I wondered is if I might just pick one of them, and then because they're so rich, these questions, I thought maybe what we could do is we could record an interview with you. And just do a video interview with the Q&A, because I think a lot of people will want them, but we don't have time to get through all of them. So, so if that's all right, either Mike or I or somebody will do a webinar with you, if that's okay, or a short 20-minute Q&A or something. But there's one question here that I would be quite keen, which was the first one that came in, which is, can you tell us more about how you get the data? So you've talked a lot about data. How do you obtain that data?
Yeah, so basically you don't need a lot of hardware. That's the first question we get, is this expensive? It's not expensive at all. I would say, you don't need to spend, if you want to take one restaurant, you spend $5,000 and you get all the sensors that you want. Hardware is becoming very, very affordable. So first of all, MAC addresses are very, very relevant. Every phone has a signal called a MAC address, and it emits it no matter if you're connected to Wi-Fi or to Bluetooth. So you can understand if that phone has been in the restaurant before. Phones that have walked by your street, if they have been your guest before, you can understand your capture rates. So MAC addresses is one, Wi-Fi data is another, and then Bluetooth beacons. Then there's very advanced Bluetooth geofencing components as well. But what I want to say is, gathering the data, that's simple. That you can outsource that. It's very easy, it's cost efficient, and it's just becoming cheaper and cheaper. What I would encourage is to really think before you put the hardware in, what is it that you want to do? Right. Do you want to correlate the light outside with the volume? Do you want to understand your scheduling with predictive forecasting of how much food you need in a restaurant? Do the user case first, because data for the sake of data is worth nothing.
Great. That's fantastic advice, and I really look forward to having a conversation with you where we can capture some of the rest of these questions. And thank you so much.